Welcome to Old World Mastery. You've got flour, you've got water, you've got an oven. So why does turning those simple things into a warm, crusty loaf of homemade bread feel like a 1,000-mile journey? What if I told you that in your kitchen right now, you have the 4 elements needed to create something magical, and that the only thing stopping you isn't a lack of skill or some expensive gadget, but just a small misunderstanding of how it all works? For generations, people made bread daily in their homes without fancy mixers or digital scales. Now, we're terrified of it. We see it as this complex chemical equation where one wrong move gets you a dense, useless brick. That ends today. This isn't just another recipe, it's a promise. By the end of this guide, you won't just bake a perfect loaf of bread, you'll understand why it's perfect. You'll get the life, the science, and the soul that lives inside your dough. Forget the fear. Forget the failures. We're not just following steps, we're going to learn the language of bread, so you can do this for the rest of your life. Section 1. The Why. Deconstructing the fear. Before we touch a single gram of flour, let's address the fear in the room. Why are we so intimidated by bread? It usually boils down to 3 things that seem mysterious: yeast, gluten, and hydration. Let's clear them up. First, yeast. It isn't some volatile chemical, it's a living organism, a tiny fungus actually, and like any living thing, it wants to eat, multiply, and in our case, release gas, specifically carbon dioxide. When you mix yeast into your dough, you're giving it a buffet of sugars from the flour. As it eats, it burps out tiny bubbles of CO2. Those bubbles get trapped in the dough, causing it to rise. That's it. That's the magic. The biggest fear is killing the yeast. Yeast is a bit of a Goldilocks. It dies if the water's too hot, and it won't wake up if it's too cold. The sweet spot for most dry yeasts is between 105 degrees Fahrenheit and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 40 to 46 degrees Celsius. If you don't have a thermometer, don't worry. The water should feel like a warm bath, not hot, not lukewarm. If you can hold your finger in it comfortably, you're good to go. Next, gluten. This is probably the most misunderstood word in baking. Gluten isn't an ingredient you add, it's a network you create. Flour has 2 proteins in it, and when you add water, they link up to form an elastic web called gluten. When you knead the dough, you're just organizing and stretching that web, making it stronger. Think of it like a net made of billions of tiny balloons. The yeast is filling those balloons with air, and the gluten is the stretchy balloon itself, trapping that air. A weak gluten network is like a cheap balloon that pops easily, which gives you a dense loaf. A strong gluten network is stretchy and powerful, holding lots of gas, which gives you that beautiful, airy structure inside. We'll feel this happen later. It's not magic, it's just mechanics. Finally, hydration. This is simply the ratio of water to flour. A higher hydration dough, more water, is usually stickier and harder to handle, but it often gives you a more open, airy crumb and a crispier crust. A lower hydration dough is stiffer, easier to knead, and gives you a tighter crumb, like a sandwich loaf. For our first go, we'll use a moderate hydration that's forgiving for beginners. The key is to remember that stickiness isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it just means your flour is well hydrated, which is what we want. So, to recap, yeast inflates the dough, gluten traps the air, hydration sets the dough's personality. That's the whole science, no more mystery. Now, let's get our ingredients. Section 2. The Core 4. Your ingredients. The beauty of basic bread is its simplicity. You only need 4 ingredients: flour, water, yeast, and salt. But the quality and type of each one do matter. Flour. This is the heart and soul of your bread. For a beginner, your best bet is a high-protein bread flour. Just look for a bag that says bread flour or strong flour. The extra protein is what forms that strong gluten network we talked about. Bread flour usually has about 12 to 14% protein, while all-purpose is a bit lower, around 10 to 12%. While you can use all-purpose, using bread flour gives you a real advantage, a stronger dough that's more forgiving and has a chewier, more satisfying texture. For today, let's stick with white bread flour for a predictable, successful first bake. Water, the lifeblood of the dough. We already know temperature is key, but sometimes even the type of water can matter. If your tap water is heavily chlorinated, it can sometimes slow down the yeast. If you know your water's harsh, just let it sit on the counter for a few hours for the chlorine to dissipate, or just use simple filtered water. No need for fancy bottled spring water. Yeast. This is our engine. You'll usually see two types of dry yeast at the store: active dry yeast and instant yeast. Active dry yeast looks like bigger granules and needs to be woken up or bloomed in warm water first. You'll know it's alive when it gets foamy. Instant yeast has finer granules, and you can mix it right in with your dry ingredients. It's generally more reliable and faster. For this guide, we're using instant yeast to keep it simple. If you only have active dry, no worries, you'll just do that blooming step first. Salt. Salt isn't just for flavor, it's a crucial part of the team. It does two big things. First, it strengthens the gluten, making the dough more stable and less sticky. Second, it acts like a traffic cop for the yeast, slowing down fermentation so the yeast doesn't burn through all of its food too fast. This gives you a more controlled rise and a much better flavor in the final loaf. Forgetting the salt is a classic beginner mistake that leads to bland, pale bread. Just try not to pour the salt directly on top of the yeast when you mix, as a big concentration of salt can kill it. And that's it. Flour, water, yeast, salt. 4 humble ingredients about to become something amazing. Section 3. The tools of the trade, and the lack thereof. You do not need a $500 stand mixer to make incredible bread. For centuries, our hands were the only tools we needed. However, there is one piece of modern gear that is non-negotiable for getting consistent results: a digital kitchen scale. Why a scale? Because baking is all about ratios. Measuring flour in cups is famously inaccurate. Depending on how you scoop it, a cup of flour can have a different weight every time, which throws your whole recipe off whack. A scale removes all the guesswork. It's the single best investment you can make in your baking. Beyond the scale, you need very little: a large mixing bowl, a dough scraper or bench knife. This is a cheap tool that's a lifesaver for handling sticky dough and cleaning your counter. A standard 9 by 5 inch loaf pan, plastic wrap, or a clean kitchen towel. That's all. No special proofing boxes, no fancy baskets. We're keeping this simple and accessible. Section 4. The recipe, a foolproof beginner's loaf. Okay, this is it, the moment of truth. We're going to walk through the 7 stages of making bread, one step at a time. I want you to focus not just on what you're doing, but on how the dough looks and feels and smells as it changes. Our recipe, in grams for precision: 500 grams of bread flour, 330 grams of warm water, around 105 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 40 to 46 degrees Celsius, 10 grams of salt, about 2 teaspoons, 7 grams of instant yeast, about 2 2/4 teaspoons. Stage 1. Measuring and mixing, the shaggy mass. In your large bowl, add your 500 grams of bread flour. Put the 7 grams of instant yeast on one side of the bowl and the 10 grams of salt on the other. This just keeps them from being in direct contact right away. Now pour in your 330 grams of warm water. Use your hand or a wooden spoon and just mix until you don't see any more dry flour. The dough will be rough, sticky, and look like a shaggy mess. This is perfectly normal. Scrape down the sides, cover the bowl with plastic wrap, and let it sit for 20 minutes. This rest period lets the flour fully absorb the water, and the gluten starts forming all on its own. It's like giving yourself a head start on kneading. Stage 2. Developing strength, kneading. After 20 minutes, turn that shaggy dough out onto a clean, unfloured countertop. Yes, unfloured. It will be sticky, and your first instinct will be to add more flour. Resist that urge. A little stickiness actually helps the dough cling to the counter, which creates tension as you knead. Here's a simple kneading technique. Grab the dough from the side farthest from you, pull it towards you, and fold it over on itself. Now use the heel of your hand to push it firmly away. Give the dough a quarter turn and repeat. Pull, fold, push. Set a timer for 10 minutes. For the first few minutes, the dough will be a sticky disaster. It will stick to your hands and the counter. This is where most beginners panic and start throwing flour everywhere. Don't do it. Just keep kneading. Use your bench scraper to scrape everything back into the main ball of dough. After 5 to 6 minutes, you'll feel a huge change. The stickiness will fade as the gluten develops. The dough will become smoother, more elastic, and will start to feel alive. After about 10 minutes, it's time for the window pane test. This is the classic way to know if your gluten is ready. Pinch off a small piece of dough and gently stretch it between your fingers. If you can stretch it thin enough to see light through it without it tearing, your gluten is perfect. If it tears right away, knead for another 2 to 3 minutes and try again. Stage 3. The first rise, bulk fermentation.